Almost everyone starts here. Their very first move with money is to buy shares. In this plan, shares come third, and they arrive almost reluctantly. Not because shares are worse than property, they are not, but because by this point in the plan, something has quietly gone wrong with the strategy that got you here. The engine is running, the property is leveraged to the hilt, and one day the bank looks at all of it and says, no more. That no is the reason shares finally enter the plan. And what they do when they get here is the opposite of everything you have done so far. One note before we open the plans. This is general information, not personal advice. This is the pattern I have watched get built, not a set of instructions for you. Your situation is your own, so get advice before you act. Now, why is this the step that trips people up? Because they judge shares as an investment. Is the return good? Is the timing right? And that is the wrong question for step 3. In this plan, shares are not chosen to win a race against property. They are chosen to do 3 specific jobs the property portfolio can no longer do. And they arrive at the single highest tax moment of the entire plan, which is why the whole step turns on one decision that has nothing to do with which shares you buy. By the end of this, you will be able to read that wall. Why shares sit here and not first, the 3 jobs they quietly do, and the decision that separates a clever step 3 from an expensive one. Start with why shares are not step 1. In this plan, the first 2 moves are built on leverage. The business throws off profit, the profit becomes a deposit, the deposit lets you control a property worth 5 or 6 times as much using the bank's money. That is a powerful machine, and while it runs, you keep feeding it. Buy, hold, use the growing equity to buy the next one. But leverage has a hard edge, and it is called serviceability. The bank does not lend against your dreams. It lends against your income and your existing assets, and there is a ceiling. At some point, you go back for the next loan, and the numbers no longer stack up. The bank says no, not because you have failed, because you have succeeded all the way to the wall, and that changes the question entirely. You still have surplus coming out of the engine every year, but you can no longer point it at more leveraged property. So where does it go? It goes into the one asset that asks for no debt, needs no bank's permission, and can be bought one small piece at a time. That is the moment shares enter. Not as the exciting new investment, as the answer to a wall you are always going to hit. So if shares are not here to beat property, what are they here to do? 3 jobs. Draw them once and the whole step makes sense. The first job is liquidity. Property is one big lumpy thing. You cannot sell the back bedroom to cover a bad quarter. It takes months to sell, and it sells all at once or not at all. After a decade of holding assets you cannot move, the plan wants something it can. Shares can be sold in part on almost any day for cash in your account within a week. For the first time in the plan, you are holding wealth you can actually reach. The second job is income that needs no tenant and no tool belt. A property pays you rent, but it also asks for something back. Repairs, vacancies, a tenant who stops paying, a phone call on a Sunday. Shares in good companies just pay dividends. The money arrives whether or not you did anything that quarter. And in Australia, there is a twist that makes that income unusually efficient: franking. When an Australian company pays tax on its profit and then pays you a dividend from what is left, it hands you a credit for the tax it already paid. So you are not taxed twice on the same dollar. Handled correctly, that credit softens the tax on your dividend income, and in the gentlest cases can wipe it out. That is not a loophole. It is the deliberate design of the Australian imputation system, and it is genuinely one of the most shareholder-friendly features in the developed world. It earns its own breakdown, and it has one coming. The third job is the quiet one, gentle tax, and to see why it matters, you have to be honest about when this step arrives, which is exactly what the next section is about. Here is the part the finance channels skip, because it is not exciting. Step 3 arrives at the worst possible tax moment of your entire life. Think about where you are. The business is mature and paying you well. The property is grown and some of it is paying rent. You are, on paper, at the peak of your earning power and probably sitting near the top marginal bracket. And now, on top of all of that, you start adding a fresh stream of dividend income. Every new dollar of that income lands on top of the pile and gets taxed at your highest rate. So, the cruel joke of step 3 is this. You finally have the most surplus cash of your life, and it arrives in the years the tax office takes the biggest bite, which means the goal quietly shifts. Early in the plan, in the property years, you chased growth. Here, growth on top of a top bracket income can be more tax working against you, not for you. So the tilt moves away from assets that just pile on more taxable income and toward income that is treated gently and structures that hold it somewhere kinder than your own name. And this is where the channel has to be clear about its lane. I'm not going to tell you which shares to buy. I never will. That is not what this channel does, and it is not where the real decision is anyway, because two people can buy the exact same shares in the exact same year and end up with wildly different outcomes. Not because one picked better, but because one held them in the right place and the other held them in their own name at the top rate. The asset is almost the easy part. What you own is far less important at this stage than who owns it, and that is the wall of step 3. So, the wall. In step 2, the wall was how you hold and finance the property. In step 3, it is simpler to say and just as easy to get wrong. Where do the shares live? The same parcel of shares can be owned 4 very different ways, and each one changes the tax on every dividend and every eventual sale. Own them in your own name, and the income stacks straight onto your top bracket salary, the harshest outcome, and where most people default without thinking. Own them through a company, and the income is capped at the flat company rate instead of your personal rate, often lower, and a place to hold rather than spend. Own them through a family trust, and the income can be directed to whoever in the family is taxed most gently that year, or streamed into a company to sit at that flat rate, or own them inside superannuation, where the tax on investment income is the lowest in the country, the catch being that you cannot touch it until you are allowed to. None of these is the answer. They are 4 different rooms, each with its own tax climate, and the advisor's job in step 3 is to work out which room each dollar of income should sleep in. Get that right. And the same shares that would have been taxed to the bone in your own name quietly compound in a gentler corner of the structure. And notice what shares are quietly doing to the shape of the whole plan. For 2 steps, the goal was leverage. Borrow, control, amplify. Shares arrive with none of that. No loan, no bank, no debt to service. They are the first unlevered asset in the plan. And that is not an accident. This is the point where the structure stops reaching for more and starts steadying itself. Liquid, income paying, owing nothing to anyone, the ballast settling low in the hull right before the seas change. Because the plan is now almost fully built. The engine runs, the property is leveraged and growing, the shares are paying in the right rooms, owing nothing, and that is the exact condition the final step needs. A structure holding one big debt on one side and a liquid, income-paying, unlevered position on the other. Step 4 is where you finally get to reach for the switch. So step 3 is not simply buy shares. It is this. When the engine's borrowing finally runs out, take the surplus it still throws off and move it into the one asset that needs no debt and no bank, a liquid, franked, hands-off income stream. Accept, honestly, that it arrives at your highest tax years and win the step not by picking cleverer shares, but by choosing the right room for the income to live in. That is the ballast, the unglamorous weight, low in the structure that pays you, that you can actually reach, and that owes nothing to anyone. Everyone else made this their first move. In this plan, it is the third, and it only works because of the 2 steps beneath it. Get it right, and the plan is now almost whole. An engine, a leveraged asset, and a steady, liquid income all standing together, which leaves one move, the one that looks like a mistake, The one where, after years of borrowing on purpose, the whole plan reaches over and switches the debt off. Next in the series is the final step, and the one that surprises everyone: the exit. For 3 steps, this plan has done one thing above all: take on debt, control assets, accumulate. Step 4 does the opposite. It sells the engine, using a set of concessions written for exactly that moment, and it deliberately switches the leverage off. It is the step that looks like a contradiction, and it is where building wealth turns into living on it. If this was useful, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel reach more Australians who need to see this. And subscribe so you catch the final step the moment it lands.